Story, single long narrative paragraph. The first thing people noticed wasn't the boy's face but the dogs. 9 of them. Massive German Shepherds and Belgian Malinois. Muscles tight, teeth visible. Leashes pulled hard by uniformed officers as they formed a closing circle around a black boy, who couldn't have been older than 14. Standing alone near gate C-17 of the international terminal. His backpack slung over one shoulder, his sneakers scuffed, his hands frozen halfway up as if his body had decided to surrender before his mind. Even caught up, and in that moment the airport, usually a place of rolling suitcases, tired laughter, and the hum of announcements, fell into a strange electric silence broken only by the low growls of trained animals and the sharp commands of security officers telling everyone to step back. Because something about the scene felt wrong in a way that tightened chests and made phones rise instinctively into the air, recording, streaming, documenting, as if people already knew history was about to happen here. And the boy, whose name was Elijah Carter though no one knew it yet, felt his heart slam against his ribs so hard it hurt, because he had flown alone for the first time in his life, sent by his mother from Atlanta to San Francisco to spend the summer with an uncle after she picked up a second job and couldn't watch him, and she had hugged him tight at the departure gate, whispering, "Keep your head up, keep your hands visible, and remember who you are." Words that felt like armor. Then but now felt frighteningly thin as the lead officer, a tall man with a clipped voice and mirrored sunglasses, demanded to know what was in Elijah's bag, and Elijah tried to answer calmly, saying it was just clothes, books, and his grandma's old leather journal. But his voice cracked anyway, because fear doesn't care how innocent you are, and as the dogs tightened their circle and one lunged forward before being yanked back, a woman screamed somewhere behind him. A child began to cry, and a businessman in a gray suit muttered that this was going too far. Yet no one stepped in, because fear has a way of making witnesses into statues. And then the twist no one expected began to unfold when a TSA supervisor pushed through the crowd holding a tablet, whispering urgently to the lead officer, who frowned, because the alert that triggered this response wasn't about a weapon or drugs, but about a missing item flagged by a private security algorithm contracted by the airport. An experimental system designed to detect anomalous passenger behavior. A phrase so vague it could mean almost anything, and Elijah's anomaly, it turned out, was that he had checked in under a one-way ticket purchased with cash, traveled alone, carried an old journal filled with handwritten codes his grandmother used as memory exercises after her stroke, and paused too long in front of a security camera because he was rereading a text from his mom telling him she loved him, and the algorithm, blind to context and heavy with bias baked in by data no one questioned enough, had escalated the alert automatically to the highest threat tier, summoning K-9 units without a human ever stopping to ask whether a child standing alone might simply be scared. And as this information rippled quietly among the officers, the crowd only saw the tension rise, not fall, because procedures once started are hard to stop, and the lead officer, feeling eyes and cameras on him, doubled down, ordering Elijah to kneel. And that was the moment the airport collectively held its breath, because Elijah didn't kneel. Not out of defiance, but because his legs locked, his body remembering too many stories, too many warnings, too many videos watched late at night when he should have been asleep, and he whispered, barely audible, "Please, I didn't do anything." And somehow that whisper cut through the noise, reaching an older man in a wheelchair near the windows, a retired federal judge named Harold Whitman, who had spent 40 years interpreting the Constitution and the limits of state power, and something about seeing a child surrounded by dogs where rights should have been was more than he could bear. So he raised his voice, shaky but clear, demanding the officers state probable cause, citing case law from memory, and suddenly the crowd found its spine, because authority challenged invites courage and others joined in, a flight attendant saying the boy had passed security already, a nurse saying this was traumatizing a minor, a college student live streaming and narrating everything, and the pressure mounted not just from the crowd but from the internet, because within minutes the video was everywhere, captions reading 9 dogs versus 1 kid, and "This is America?" And executives in glass offices miles away began making frantic calls, and then came another twist, quieter but deeper, when one of the K-9 handlers, a young woman named Officer Ramirez, noticed her dog sitting down calmly instead of growling. A trained signal that it detected no threat, and she spoke up, voice steady, saying the dogs weren't alerting, that the behavior didn't match the response level, and for a second the system wavered, because systems do that when enough human truth presses against them, and the lead officer hesitated, realizing the story he would have to tell later mattered more than the show of force now, and he ordered the dogs pulled back, the circle loosening, air rushing back into the space like a held breath released, and Elijah didn't realize he was crying until he felt. Tears hit his shoes, and then something extraordinary happened, something no one could script, because Judge Whitman asked Elijah if he was okay, and Elijah nodded, and the judge reached into his jacket, pulling out a small Constitution booklet he carried everywhere, handing it to the boy and saying, "This belongs to you too." And the image of that exchange went viral faster than the confrontation itself, reframing the narrative from fear to rights, from suspicion to humanity. And yet the story didn't end there, because investigations followed and journalists dug into the algorithm, uncovering that it disproportionately flagged black and brown travelers, especially minors traveling alone, and congressional hearings were called, executives testified under oath, policies were rewritten, and airports nationwide suspended similar systems. All because one frightened boy stood still long enough for the truth to catch up, and Elijah's life changed in ways he couldn't have imagined. Because he became the reluctant face of a movement for algorithmic accountability, speaking softly but clearly at events, always saying he didn't want fame, just fairness. And years later, when he returned to that same airport as a college student studying computer science, he walked past gate C-17, paused, and smiled. Not because the memory didn't hurt, but because it proved something powerful, that even in places built for speed and suspicion, humanity can interrupt, courage can spread, and when enough people decide that one child deserves dignity, the entire system has to listen, and that is what happened next, and why no one who saw it ever forgot it.